Welcome to the podcast. My name is David. Let's save the world. This is going to be a fun episode because we're talking about urban legends. That's right. From the ancient folklore to the friend of a friend campfire stories like the vanishing hitchhiker and the serial killer with a hook for a hand, to even recent creepypasta that some believe have come to life. These are stories that have influenced our culture and certainly influenced our horror movies. And we're going to get deep into that in just a little bit with the author of Film, Folklore and Urban Legends, Dr. Mikel Koven. But first, Into the Dark is Blumhouse's monthly anthology series on Hulu. And the latest episode is Pooka Lives.
Yes.
Joining me to talk about it is one of the stars who has to face off against that cute but deadly killer, is the even cuter and even deadlier Laurel Toupal. How are you?
I'm good. You know, I've been in quarantine, but I am making things work for me. Thank you for having me. I think it's awesome that you're, creating content during this rough time we're in where everyone's in quarantine and all. So I'm really excited to get started.
It's either be bored and stare at your walls or listen to you. And let's be honest, you're right up there.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So this project, Pooka Lives, is going to be the first time a lot of people have heard of you. So give us some background on where you come from, how you got into the industry, and kind of what you've done before this.
Okay, so I kind of started acting in 6th grade, but it was only like stage acting. So I got more and more interested in it. I was playing 5 sports at once because I grew up in a very athletic family. So I was trying to balance starting my theater life and playing soccer and volleyball and all of that. Eventually, I decided that acting was what I wanted to pursue and dedicate my time to. So eventually, I went to Texas State University, got my BFA in acting there, along with 10 other people in my class. After that, I moved to Los Angeles to fully pursue it, and I eventually got an agent and started pursuing TV and film more. So I've done student films, indie films, all that stuff. So this was my first, big movie with such a well-known production company. So this was very, very exciting for me. And I was just really lucky to get this audition,
I don't think luck had anything to do with it. So you're right, though. Blumhouse is synonymous with horror at this point. I mean, they're a big, big deal. No pressure at all, I'm sure.
Oh, my gosh.
So
I know.
How did that go from, indie films, student films to, hey, I'm in front of Blumhouse and, oh, now I'm in front of the cameras. How did that go?
Well, I first
good agent.
Yes, a wonderful agent. Nick has been so helpful for me during this process of transitioning from only doing like theater, kind of transitioning to TV film and getting me auditions in Los Angeles. Since I'm new to this whole Los Angeles networking culture and all of that, he was just super, super excited to work with me. So I felt comfortable working with him, and he's just been getting me auditions. And eventually I got this role because through a chain of events, really. Originally, my agent sent me an audition for a March episode of Into the Dark. And it was for the role of Party Girl. It was a one-liner. And they asked me to do it 3 different ways. So I tried to make everything super specific and clear. So each take was very different from the last. It showed them new ways or new takes on this character. I sent that in. I found out maybe a week later that they were really interested in me for that party girl part. I didn't hear back after that, though. A month or so goes by. I get another audition from them, but this time it was for Pooka 2 for the role of Becky. I worked really hard to figure out, first of all, what Pooka was, who Pooka was, because they did Pooka 1 in their season 1. So this was their first sequel. Originally, in one of the sides that I got, they gave me a scene where I had to do the Pooka dance with Lauren, and it's actually the bedroom scene right before I come face to face with Pooka for the first time. Originally, I was supposed to do the whole Pooka dance with her, but in the final script, they cut that out. So I had to learn what the Pooka dance was. And that was just really, really fun for me. I got to read the script for the first time. I sent them the audition, and I found out I was pinned for the role. And then they sent me, or my agent called me while I was at Anime Expo, actually. And he said that I got the role, and I was just like super excited, thrilled. I felt so freaking blessed, that it just happened to work out that way. But it was just a series of events, really.
So the point is, you have to learn your dance moves if you're going to make it in Hollywood.
Exactly.
I mean,
do your research.
Yeah. Do your research on Pooka dances, and you too can star in big movies. Now, this one in particular, Alejandro Brugués is the director. Juan of the Dead, great film. He balances scares and fun really, really well. But I can see where it would be a little bit of a tightrope to walk. Did you work with him on what the tone was? Do I go too far scares or too far into comedy? Because this has got them both.
Well, we had a table read, first of all. I didn't realize, because my scenes aren't necessarily, they have some comedy in it. Of course, she's a phone-obsessed teen. So there's some in there, but there's not a lot for my scene. So I had no idea really until reading the full script and seeing everyone's take on it. It was, a nice mixture of comedy and horror, which is great. It's so fun. My personality already leans to the comedy side, and I've already done a bunch of horror stuff from student films and indie films. So I kind of got that vibe. Of course, like before every scene, he would just kind of talk with me about what he wants from my character, what the scene is, of course. But yeah, that was pretty much how I kind of figured out what the tone of it was. But he was great to talk to. He was very welcoming, a great director, of course. And the cast was awesome. So that kind of just helped me figure out where I should take Becky.
Yeah, well, this is unrelated to anything, but Becky better get off them dating apps.
I know. My gosh.
It's only going to get you in trouble, Becky.
That's what I learned from this. Never, ever go on Tinder or any kind of dating site ever.
So you mentioned your prior work, and last night I saw Party Night on
Tubi. My gosh.
Party Night is available for free on Tubi. It's a low budget, but I had fun with it. It's a fun little film, I thought. And this is your second slasher kind of film. So are you a fan of slashers or horror in general? Do you have a favorite?
I'm definitely a fan of doing them. I think they're probably the most fun to be. It's like the most fun experience to be an actor in a horror film, because you get the blood, you get the action, you get the fun stereotypes for it as well. So it's always a fun experience acting in it. I wasn't a fan of horror until acting in Party Night, pretty much, because I really respected the genre after that. I had prior experience watching horror films, like watching Saw and The Crazies and The Mist, all of that.
Feel good movies. I got
yes. Oh, the ones that just make you sleep at night.
Yeah. Right.
But yeah, I was definitely I'm a huge fan of watching horror films now. I just wish my friends were as interested in it because they're all scaredy cats. I like watching Blumhouse films like Get Out and all of that. So
Well, you need new friends, and I think that LA is going to have a lot of horror fans that you're going to meet. So don't listen. Don't at me, friends. Okay. You're all great, I'm sure.
I'll tell them they're not.
Please, that's fine. So tell me about what Pooka is. I know we had the first film, but tell me what the concept this time is about how Pooka returns.
Okay. So Pooka Lives is about pretty much a writer named Derek who is forced to go back to his hometown due to continuous harassment from trolls on the internet. And during that time, he reconnects with his old friends, and they decide to make a creepypasta about the toy Pooka for laughs. Once it goes viral on the internet, it manifests into an actual murderous version of the creature, and it's pretty much up to them to stop it.
So what we're saying here is don't bully people. Don't cyberbully anyone, because the only thing that can happen from it is mass murdering stuffed animals. So prior to this, or even since now, do you have any experience reading creepypasta? Do you know anything about like your Slender Mans and the story behind that? Or maybe I know Momo is mentioned, which that's not necessarily a creepypasta, but it's a fictional character that everyone briefly thought was real.
Yes.
So what's your experience there, if any?
I was never a creepypasta reader. I looked it up after, I read the script for this movie, and I knew about Momo. It was all over Twitter and Instagram, everywhere. Super creepy. I think the only fear I have of like an urban legend is probably Bloody Mary.
Yep.
Bloody Mary has haunted my nightmares. I get so scared of turning the lights off in my bathroom because of the whole mirror. And I think about Bloody Mary, and I'm like, if I think about her, will she come out? Well, you know what I mean? So those are pretty much the only experience I have with urban legends in the sense of being scared of them.
I have a cure for you. Are you 23?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Okay. There's a drink.
Okay.
Called Bloody Mary.
Oh, yes.
Drink a few of those. You won't be scared of anything.
Exactly. That's a good idea.
It's in general. I'm again joking. In moderation. So in this, Pooka is what they call a tulpa, which is something I did not know about before. But the idea is that if enough people think about something, then it can manifest in reality. Now, Becky, kind of a skeptic on this nonsense.
Yeah.
What about Laurel? Do you believe in that kind of maybe not a tulpa, but any supernatural phenomenon, that sort of thing, or are you as skeptical as Becky?
Of course, I believe in that stuff. I'm scared of paranormal activity. I'm scared of things haunting me. I have sleep paralysis every now and then, and I know it's technically not a demon. It's not supposed to be a demon that is haunting me, but it feels like it. I've had some paranormal activity experiences, not crazy like the actual movie Paranormal Activity. I definitely believe are of course I'll tell you. I was in my room I was laying on my bed watching TV. It was pretty much 3/4. It was a can of Coke. I had a can of Coke lying on a desk. It was 3/4 of the way filled. So it was heavy. There was no way it would have, you would have to hit it for it to fall off this desk. It wasn't on the edge. It was kind of like in the middle of the desk. Anyway, I'm just watching TV. All of a sudden, it flies off the desk, and a whole can of Coke is spilled on my white carpet.
Aww.
I know. I was so sad.
It's not only a ghost, it's a rude ghost. What a jerk.
I know. What the heck is up with that? Maybe he tripped, Maybe he was just clumsy. Because I didn't have an experience really after that. Of course, sometimes you wake up from sleep paralysis and your mind is still in the dream state. So I would think I would see things in the dark.
Yep.
But hopefully I'm not possessed. You know what I mean?
Hopefully. Or actually, technically, I can see you now in this interview. So if you're in there, please summon yourself now. I sometimes have sleep paralysis as well, and frankly, I think it's kind of cool. It is scary at the time, but I love horror movies. So once I wake up, I'm like, that was awesome. I totally thought a monster was in the room choking me or something.
And you survived it. If there was a monster in your room, you survived.
Right. Otherwise, the only unexplainable events I ever have in my life, oddly enough, involve Bloody Marys. Oh,
no. We'll go down that path later,
off of microphones. So in order to summon, and you said you had to do the dance. So in order to summon Pooka, you do the Pooka challenge.
Yes. And you post it afterwards. You post you doing the challenge.
Right. So obviously there's no Pooka out there. Well, not that we know of.
Oh, God. Hopefully not.
But we have cinnamon challenges. We have the Kiki challenge. We have and she's already laughing. The ice bucket challenge. Have you actually done any challenges where you weren't in a movie? And if you have, where's the video of that?
Oh my gosh. I did the cinnamon challenge with my best friend back at home. That was an experience. We posted it on YouTube, but it's either currently unlisted or deleted. It's definitely somewhere though. I just don't know if you will be able to watch it.
And listen, what's your friend's name?
Morgan.
Yes. When she wins an Oscar, I want you to release that video to the world so that we can all remember the days when she was doing the Cinnamon Challenge before she was a big time actress. So hook the world up, Morgan.
Please.
So
it's a fun one.
No thanks.
I thought I was gonna die. Seriously, though, I wasn't expecting to choke that fast. I guess I thought it would take a while. I thought people were overreacting, like it tasted bad, but really, it's just the saliva and the cinnamon together just make it so dry that it just expands in your throat. Ooh, not fun.
No cinnamon, no Pooka, no challenges. Get over it, internet.
Stop it.
So Pooka's pretty cute, and I wish they would make some so I could put it in my room with all my other horror stuff. That would be rad. If they ever do, I'm gonna have you sign one. What was your favorite children's toy? Or is there a toy that scared you? I know you're really into video games, but do you have a favorite toy from when you were a kid?
All I could think of is Tamagotchis. Tamagotchis were so fun because you could connect with your friends and have their Tamagotchis come over to your place. or to your Tamagotchi land. There wasn't much to do on it, but the fact that you had this little digital pet and you could feed it and it would poop and you had to clean that up. But
That
they
sounds
died so
fun.
fast. I know. They were definitely my childhood. That was pretty much the only thing I can remember being like a toy that I legitimately like held on to and went to elementary school in hand with because everyone had it.
So, but I know that you do the video game play-alongs now.
Yes, I do.
And that voice may sound familiar to some people.
Yes.
From video games.
Yes.
What's going on there?
Yeah, so I'm also a voice actress, and a recent game came out called Grand Guilds. It's called Grand Guilds, and it recently came out for Nintendo Switch. It's a tactical RPG game, and I play the character Duchess Hertha. It was definitely a fun experience to do that. I started voice acting actually when I was in Los Angeles, when I just moved out here, and the opportunity kind of presented itself for me to take a class for voice acting for video games with Ray Chase. And I learned a lot, and I bought my own equipment so I could do stuff remotely. And yeah, it's been a great experience and definitely has opened up more opportunities to act for me in this industry.
Cool. That's exciting.
Yes.
So, since it's opened up more opportunities, now you're a big time star.
Oh my gosh.
After you're going toe to toe with Pooka, what do you have coming up that you can talk about?
Coming up. Let me think about that one, because coming up that I can talk about. I know I did another video game called Starflint. It was actually a French game, and they're dubbing it for Americans to play so they can reach out to a bigger audience. But yeah, it's called Starflint, and I actually don't know when it's coming out, but I did the voice for, there's a bunch of characters. Crystal, the waitress, the tattoo artist, and Trinity.
Look how talented she is.
Oh, stop it.
I have one voice and it sounds stupid.
Oh my gosh. Hey, your voice is very unique, and that can get you. That's the thing a lot of people think, is that their voice isn't good enough to be a voice actor, but it's the uniqueness of your voice that makes you a good voice actor, or what people are looking for, unique voices all around. So if anyone is interested in voice acting and thinks that they don't have a good enough voice, I definitely recommend trying it at least.
See, my future is bright. My dad was wrong. So, I mean, as far as movies, anything like that you can talk about? Or I know I saw a couple of things on the IMDb, but I'm not sure if you can mention them too much.
Oh, yeah. I know there's a couple of friends of mine. They're just short films. They're short films that have... There's one that I did called Dog that is unlisted on YouTube right now. So I don't know if they're doing the film festival circuit or not. Another friend wanted me to do voiceover work for their short film. I think it's not a big cast or anything. I just call them and have a conversation with them. I've just kind of been making my own work. I'm in the process of making a feature film with my boyfriend, Ryan Love, and we've been kind of working on that and doing lens tests and stuff to see what we like and dislike. But yeah, that's pretty much what's in. There's kind of auditions, of course, are in the works for different TV shows during this quarantine time. There's only so much we can do.
Right.
But
if they can cast Girl at Her House, then I think you've got it.
Oh yeah, no, I'm killing it right now. I got nunchucks. There was a bow staff that was supposed to come in the mail at some point, but never did. I don't know where it is. It's lost, but I'm learning a bunch of new skills now that hopefully I can apply to my acting career in the future. So the future is bright.
For the record, I was kidding about the deadly part, but maybe I wasn't.
I know.
Oh, wow. Don't mess with her. As far as that feature that you're working on with your boyfriend, would you say his name is Ryan?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
That you're in the script? Or you're writing the script, or you're at the point where you're...
Yeah, so we're on the second draft right now. He wrote the whole thing, came up with the idea. I'm essentially the script doctor, which pretty much means I edit as well as fix some scenes. Like sometimes he'll be like, can you rewrite these scenes to fit into one scene or whatever? I take what I got from his script and pretty much rewrite that scene to make it work for the whole story. Then we talk about it. So I'm kind of an advisor / writer / editor. And then I'm also going to be starring in it. So it's kind of a long process that we've been working on, but we're very excited to hopefully get funding for it and make it,
I have already forgotten the list of talents that you have that you just rattled off. I landed on my head a lot as a child, so I don't remember, but it's quite a long list of editor and script doctor and all these other things. So how could the future be anything but sparkling bright for you? I'm really excited that I got to talk to you. I do have one more question for you.
Of course.
Before I let you go, and that is, Pooka decides he knows if you've been naughty or nice, and if you've been naughty, you're in trouble. Laurel, have you been naughty or nice?
I would like to say I'm always nice, but I have nunchucks, so I'm going to say 75% naughty. Don't fight me. And then the other percent nice.
Well, I managed to make it through this entire thing without getting hit in the head with nunchucks. So I'm going to say you're 100% nice.
Thank you
for joining me here. I really appreciate it. I think you're a star in the making, and I'm excited to watch you grow into a big time star.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. This was such a fun conversation, and I hope to talk to you again sometime in the future.
Well, by then you'll be such a megastar that, and Morgan will be releasing that Cinnamon Challenge video. So Morgan did not think she was getting this many shout outs on the show.
I know. Shout out to Morgan Shea, my best friend.
But that would be great. And I'll be in touch with you as well. You're amazing. You're wonderful. I really appreciate you taking some time to talk with us.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for having me.
All right. Everybody go to Hulu and watch Into the Dark, Pooka Lives. Now, urban legends have been a part of horror for a long time. Some of you may have seen the recent film Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Well, that's based on a book, right? And the book is based on urban legends. So Harold the Scarecrow and the red spot with the spiders, that's all stuff from urban legends. So let's take a deep dive into urban legends. And with me to discuss that is senior lecturer in film studies at Worcester University and the author of Film, Folklore and Urban Legends, Dr. Mikel Koven. Thank you so much for being here.
No, thank you for having me.
I'm excited. I love urban legends. It is some of my earliest memories of being scared are from urban legends. I guess that might be part of the reason why they exist, is to scare children. So let's get into this. Give me some background on folklore and urban legends, and speaking of scaring children, the role they play in society.
Oh gosh. Well, there's so many contested names for this particular phenomena. Urban legend is just one of them. It's one I tend to use, not for academic accuracy, but because when talking to real people, it's the term that they're most familiar with. And there have been a lot of academic debates of the kind of how many angels dance on the head of a pin kind of questions, about not just what the name is, but what kind of story this is. Is this a new kind of story that emerged usually in the 1960s? It's identified, with stories like The Hook-Handed Killer and The Boyfriend's Death, The Spiders in the Beehive hairdo. These kinds of stories were some of the first recorded, in quotation marks, in air quotes, urban legends. And what academic folklorists have been doing over the years is looking at whether or not these are in fact new stories, or are they repackaged, repurposed older stories that have been brought into the modern age, with various changes in the stuff in the story. And instead of a horse-drawn carriage, it's a car kind of thing.
Right.
Let me give you a quick example. It's not a particularly horrific one, but I do think it's a nifty one. There's a very common, well-known urban legend known as the suppressed invention story. I'm sure you've heard of the fact that we do have the technology for a car that runs simply on hydrogen off of water. But that the big automobile manufacturers are intentionally keeping this off the market. Right? We all know that story?
Sure.
Well, there's a story, I believe it's in Pliny, the elder or the younger, one of the Plinys, a story told, I think, about the Emperor Augustus, one of the ancient Roman emperors. Basically, there was this day that he was inviting all the inventors in Rome to show what they've been working on. And this one fellow brings him a very plain-looking vase. And the emperor says, okay, it's nice. It's a vase. I'm not sure what you want me to do with this. To which the inventor takes it back. He throws it on the ground, but it doesn't break. He says, see, what my real invention is unbreakable glass. So the emperor had him killed because if word got out of this, it would have destroyed the Roman glass market.
Okay.
So it's the same story, that there are power interests who are intentionally keeping things off the market in order to protect the industry, not protect technology or the society. So here we have a very old story coming out from the ancient Roman period. But when we tell it about the big five car manufacturers wanting to keep hydrogen fueled cars off the market, or light bulbs that never burn out, these kinds of things.
I've actually, my background is in music, and just growing up as a kid, I always heard that certain singers would have a rib removed so they could perform certain sexual activities.
They could self-fellatiate.
Yes.
I like that phrase, self-fellatiate.
There we go. And you're much smarter than I am.
No.
And the celebrity who supposedly did that changes with every trend, and I'm sure there's one out there now that people are saying that. So it's funny how almost kind of like, I mean, not to get too into it, but kind of a little bit like religion, in that it's either going to change and adapt with society, or it's not going to stick around very long because the people will no longer identify with it.
Absolutely, and you've hit the nail right on the head there. These stories persist because they are useful. They're stories a society or a culture needs. That doesn't necessarily have to be the big society like Western society or American society or Canadian or British society. It can be something as banal as I don't know, the community in a particular school, for example, or within a particular trade craft or something like that.
Gotcha. So we deal a lot with horror movies here, and it seems like horror movies and urban legends are a perfect fit. A lot of them, like I said, when I was growing up, I would read them and get scared. There's one in particular that I love about People Can Lick Too.
Oh, yes, it's one of my favorites.
It's so frightening because it's it's about threatening children and animals, and those are two things no one wants to have hurt, and that one just always scared me so much growing up. So they're like little horror stories.
Yep.
And so what are some ways that it speaks to that audience? And are there theories as to why we're attracted to, as a little kid, I'm reading stories that are scaring the crap out of me? Why do we do this to ourselves?
Oh, gosh, there are lots of little questions in there. Why, just to answer the one you just asked most straightforwardly, why do we do this to ourselves? It's difficult to speculate, and I would suggest that different people like these stories for different reasons and get something different out of them. That being said, I think there's something about, if you imagine we're all sitting around the campfire, and what's illuminated is, say, 6 or 7 feet of a circumference around us. So we're there with our friends or our family, warm by the campfire. We can see sort of a 6-foot radius all around the campfire. But beyond that radius is total blackness. We don't know Jason is out there in the woods, for example. We don't know what lies in those darker regions beyond the campfire. And so, on the one hand, yes, we are telling these stories to terrify ourselves and to terrify each other with what lies beyond the safety of the campfire. But it's also reassuring that if we're telling the story, it means we're still safe.
Right.
If you weren't safe, you wouldn't be telling the story.
Right.
So there's this reassuring quality that yes, there are monsters out there, but for now we're safe in this huddled little group.
Gotcha. So you, in your book, Film, Folklore and Urban Legends, you really kind of opened my eyes to a certain thing, and that's the movie Halloween. There's a thought in horror that if you have sex, you're going to die. And it all started with Halloween, da 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 da. And you kind of restructure that. And I actually think that it's a really interesting thing that it goes beyond just that. And maybe some of those ripoff movies just weren't thinking very deeply. So can you explain to the audience what your theory was really about?
Well, first of all, thank you for both the plug and your generous comments. My idea was, if we look at Halloween like an urban legend, by which what I mean is, if we study the film in the same way that we study the oral tales or the printed stories. There's a particular folklorist by the name of Daniel Barnes, who many, many years ago suggested a particular structure to these stories. The structure is 4 particular points in the story. There's an interdiction. There's a warning not to do something. There's a violation of that interdiction. You do it. Then there are the consequences. What happens when you violate that interdiction? And finally, and only in some cases, there is the attempted escape of people trying to get away in that regard. And Barnes was able to show that particular structure of an urban legend occurs in a whole bunch of different stories. And I applied that to certain kinds of slasher films. Not all slasher films work with this pattern, but there were a number of them that do. In particular, as we're talking about it, Halloween seems to really function closely within that interdiction, violation, consequences, attempted escape overall structure. The problem is, as neatly as the film fits into it, into that structure, the interdiction part, when you are told not to do something, the don't have sex rule doesn't work. It doesn't make any sense to introduce that, because that's not what people are being punished for. And in looking at the film itself and looking at the text and saying, often the interdictions in these stories are, what's the word I'm looking for? They're implicit. They're not explicit. These stories don't start off with somebody saying, there's a rule that, blah, 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 blah. Here's why we have that rule. Some stories might have that, but by and large, they don't. We tend to be thrown into these stories en media res, right into the middle of the story with the violation, even though we don't know what interdiction is being violated. So we're thrown in, and we've got to kind of figure it out. What did we do wrong? What did we do wrong that this monster is now chasing us? And the no sex rule didn't seem to work for me in that particular structure. So I was looking at the film and looking at the film text and the structure as to what could it be. And what I found was that the interdiction isn't about having sex as a teenager, because let's face it, we're all going to do that. It was actually about responsibility in babysitting, of all things. And you sort of look at that, just treat that as a hypothesis for now. That hypothesis is there, that Halloween is not about fear of adolescent sexuality. It's about the fear of not being responsible when you're babysitting, and suddenly it becomes almost laughable. It's seemingly such an absurd premise to use. But then you look at the repercussions. And first of all, you look at it in terms of the text. Does the text support this particular interpretation, this particular reading? And when we look at who's killed, let's move the first murder of Judith Meyer off to one side for a second. The only time the babysitting girls or Bob are at risk from Michael Myers is when they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. That Annie, if she hadn't left Lindsay with Laurie, so she could go off and meet her boyfriend, everybody focuses on she's going off to meet her boyfriend to have sex. But actually what she's just done is abandon her duty. And it becomes a different kind of story. It becomes a story where young people, I hate the word sort of children or teenagers or something like that, because it's a wide group that I'm talking about here, from say 14 years of age or younger to 22, 23, or possibly even older. But in that demographic, who not coincidentally are the same demographic that are going to see films like Halloween, that the responsibility, if you think about your responsibility as a babysitter, I'm assuming we've all done babysitting, it's a huge responsibility, particularly if the unthinkable happens and that's a psychotic madman comes calling, wanting to kill you. Do you have the resources? Are you smart enough? Are you mature enough? Are you capable of protecting not only yourself, but also the child or children that you are looking after? And that as a very real kind of fear, even if an unspoken fear. Nobody's at the age of 16, 17 is really afraid of sex. They're afraid maybe of being too young to have it or not getting any at all, but they're not really afraid of sex. They're afraid of responsibility. And I noticed the same pattern around that idea of adolescent responsibility in a number of these urban legend-like slasher films. So it's there in The Burning, it's there in Friday the 13th, at least the first Friday the 13th, where everybody assumes that those murders are motivated by a kind of sexual impetus. But really it's about you're having sex, you're pleasing yourselves, and you're not looking after the kids, which is what we're paying you to do.
Got you. And that is like I said, I think in the book you were a little self-deprecating with it, but I that makes sense to me. It sounds a lot deeper psychologically than just the simple, oh yeah, there's some kids and they want to, go off and do stuff together. That resonates with me, because I think in that age range of high school and college where am I an adult now? Do I have adult responsibilities? Oh no.
Exactly.
So,
and I mean, part of the problem is that a remarkably successful film like Scream really perpetuated I don't want to say the wrong beliefs, because that's hugely presumptuous of me, but it certainly perpetuated this fallacy, this misinformation that these films are all about, don't have sex, don't do drugs, don't say I'll be right back. I would need to go back over an awful lot of films, but I can't remember any film other than Scream where somebody says I'll be right back.
Right. Obviously, horror movies are influenced by urban legends. Give me some really good examples that people might know that they might say, oh, that was an urban legend before.
Oh, gosh. Well, most of my examples are, I'm afraid, fairly dated, mostly because they were the popular films when I was quite young and was hearing both the legends and aware of the films. I really need to get my act in gear and update some of my examples here. There's a film from 1978, and it was remade, I think, in 2008, called When a Stranger Calls. The original is much better than the horrible remake. But this is all based on the legend of the babysitter and the man upstairs, where she gets these calls, have you checked the children? She thinks it's a crank call, but they trace the call, and it turns out the call is coming from inside the house.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that was one. There's another great film I enjoy just because it's so wonderfully silly, from 1980, called Alligator, which uses the alligator in the sewers story.
Yep. And I thought that was true when I was a kid as well.
Oh, you know what? At the time these movies came out and the time we're telling these stories, I thought they were true. I remember I'm sorry for using brand names on your show. Hopefully you won't get sued for this. But I remember a story about the Bubble Yum, that was just being introduced into Canada. It had been in the States for a couple of years by that point. What was delaying the release in Canada was that they had found spiders' eggs in Bubble Yum. And so, yeah, we can never chew that stuff. We'll stay with the Canadian Bubblicious, I think was our equivalent. So, yeah, absolutely believe these stories.
And in fact, when I was a kid or when I was a teenager, I worked at a candy store and we sold Pop Rocks. And almost every day someone said, I can't believe you would sell these. Don't you know they killed Mikey from Life Cereal? And it's like, Mikey's still alive. He's like a grown man now. Everything's fine. But it's really strange how the word spreads, and even if it's not true, it gets around and a lot of people believe it. One of the ones was my earlier guest, Laurel Toupal, is in a movie called Pooka Lives, and she mentioned to me that she is afraid of Bloody Mary, and that is connected to Candyman, right?
Yep. Yes, it is. And I talk about it in the book is the Bloody Mary legend, which is not something that I guess it mostly circulates amongst teen and preteen girls, which is probably why I had not heard this particular story. I heard about the urban legends when I first saw Candyman, but as I became a folklorist and started studying these materials, I started seeing more and more levels, more resonances, more things that were being explored in the film. And this ritual of saying Bloody Mary 3 to 5 times in a mirror, holding a candle, she'll appear behind you or reach out of the mirror and scratch your face or something like that.
In fact, in your book, you mentioned that there's a variant of the Bloody Mary legend where she appears blue and she's going to help you, white, and she'll leave you alone, or red and you're in trouble. And I actually found that interesting when I was watching Pooka Lives to talk with Laurel. He has a thing where if he's showing blue, you're okay. And if it's red, he's going to kill you. So I was like, oh, wow. A lot of things were influenced by urban legends, and I didn't even know it.
Now here's one of the, just to make this all really pragmatic, is urban legends are free, right? Fairy tales are free. They're part of oral culture. If I wanted to make a film based on Bloody Mary or The Hook-Handed Killer or The Babysitter and the Man Upstairs or Cinderella or Snow White or any fairy tale, it's part of oral tradition, which means so long as I don't directly copy Disney or another film, I can put this out as my own film, as my own story. And for screenwriters, I don't know why there isn't more of this material out there, because it's free to use. It's what do you call it? Public access material.
Sure. So, all right, here we go. Folklore, in your book, you mentioned, is often based on the fear and anxieties of the time. You mentioned that earlier, kind of otherizing the people who aren't like you or what have you. What are some examples? And I know you mentioned some in the book that this has crept into movies. I know especially one thing that interested me was I often think of science fiction, and which is accurate, that it leans to the left because you have things like, Twilight Zone and Star Trek that have kind of forged that path of left, inclusion and sort of, I guess, what would be called left-wing thinking. But there's a conservative bent to a lot of this stuff.
I disagree. I think there is a conservative bent in some of it, but the stuff that really gets me and gets me interested, because I am a self-proclaimed lefty liberal, is that horror films can often be deeply subversive. And often, the surface may be a return to normalcy, a return to, what's the great phrase? Patriarchal heteronormativity, that this is the conservative way, this is the normal way, this is what we expect. By virtue of having gone across the challenges of that within the horror film, that actually enough of the ground has become unstable. Let alone when we get into films like the George Romero zombie films, which are completely apocalyptic.
Oh, sure.
Capitalist patriarchy will not come back together again in the wake of Romero's zombie apocalypse, or possibly COVID-19. I was expecting a laugh there. Work with me.
Okay.
That there is, I find horror to be a deeply subversive genre. And when I find something that is really conservative, or at least doesn't seem to be as challenging or as radical or as subversive as it could have been, I'm usually pretty disappointed. And I know we sort of, in the emails we've been exchanging, sort of this cropped up a couple of times. It's one of the problems I have with the movie Slender Man. It's one of the problems I have with the whole Conjuring and Annabelle and Insidious cycle of films, the Paranormal Activity films, is they all go back to a place of conformity and conservative values at the expense of the radical journey that's gone before. And I do find them to be deeply, deeply conservative films.
And you mentioned a couple in the book, like The Swarm. Hey, if they have a political agenda, that's fine. But that kind of hit me as, wow, that's a messed up movie. If that's what they were going for, it seems pretty not only xenophobic but racist.
Absolutely. In doing that particular bit of research that's in the book, and I was looking at the science behind the killer bee phenomena and what it is. This is not something that I needed to go into some specialist journals, really obscure stuff in order to find out. This is part of any apiarist, any beekeeper could tell you the exact same history that I was reading about. So it's not like it's hidden knowledge at all. It's not esoteric. But the terminology is not, with killer bees, is possibly the Africanized bee, or the Africanized honeybee, rather. The Brazilian honeybee is the fusion of the African and the European honeybee. So doing the research, doing 30 seconds worth of research is not impossible on this stuff. To then in The Swarm get so lazy with the screenplay that rather than saying even by tomorrow there'll be no more Africanized honeybees, of saying by tomorrow there'll be no more Africans, this is a really big difference in the writing, right?
Yeah. It's either gross incompetence or something even grosser.
That's right. That's right.
So yeah, sorry, the movie wasn't that good. So one thing I have to hear about is I had known about the kind of racist beginnings of zombie cinema and the, I guess, inspiration from Haiti. But you're saying it actually goes back farther than that into British and Northern European ballads. Can you kind of take us through that evolution to where they became, Romero zombies preaching
Sure.
left-wing ideas?
Now, for this, I need to draw in some later research that I've done, including some quite contemporary stuff that I'm working on at the moment. And the basic points of that particular chapter still hold for whatever they're worth, but it's much more complicated, much more complex than I seem to have indicated originally. There are different kinds of zombies in the movies. I'm talking specifically about the movie traditions here now. Some are the Romero zombies, and for lack of a better term, their children, the zombie movies that they've inspired. Then there are other kinds of used within zombie movies, but come from a tradition known as the reverence. What a reverent is, and reverents crop up in European folklore, European folk tales, as well as European ballads, are people back from the dead. They're ghosts, but they tend to have corporeal bodies. They are not like a wispy white image out of the corner of your eye kind of ghost. They are, hey, that's Dan. I'm looking at Dan's face. I can smell his breath. Like it's that kind of up close and personal kind of tradition. And those revenants often come back to complete a task or to right a wrong. They're ghosts with a purpose, as it were. Or zombies with a purpose. And so we need to go well beyond the George Romero films, even in some of the earlier traditions. Sugar Hill, for example, just off the top of my head, which is a terrific zombie blaxploitation film from the early 70s. And in this, Sugar Hill, the protagonist, raises an army of zombies in order to avenge the death of her lover, and to get the mob off of her back. So here she is using zombies intentionally as revenants, as her own resurrected army. And once she's accomplished that task, they go back to being dead. They don't just stumble off into a new dawn, as it were. Now, I wrote a piece a couple of years ago, and David, I don't mind getting you a copy of a PDF of this, and I don't know if you make this available to your listeners or whatnot.
I can if you don't mind.
Yeah, I don't mind, so long as proper credit is given. This piece that I'm talking about traced the different traditions in zombie movies. So there's the zombie slave, which comes from the Haitian idea. There's the zombie revenant. There's the apocalyptic zombies, and these kinds of trying to group them into little families, into little like folklorists study fairy tales into tale type clusters, as it were. And so what that, in answer to your question, what that has revealed to me is the fact that some of the connections I was making when I wrote that particular chapter aren't actually the case. And in fact, I was mixing and matching different kinds of traditions, that there are the specific European tradition. Now, this ties in with what I was saying earlier about the fact that these stories, these folk stories, are free to use because it's part of our intangible culture. But not enough screenwriters are looking to folklore for ideas, because flicking through, when I was doing the zombie research that you're talking about, I was finding such wonderful nastiness in these folk stories that I've never seen in a film. There's a tradition from India. There's an individual motif that I found, which the description was simply corpse bites off person's nose. I want to see that in a movie, you know?
And of course, I mentioned my favorite part of the entire book was the corpse froth.
Yep.
That is so disgusting that I can't believe it hasn't been put into a film, or at least not one that I've seen. It's well, I mean, you'll certainly explain it better.
You tell it.
Well, it's the is it like not a sorcerer, but the person who's conjuring the dead. The corpse comes up, and there's this mix of muck and, I don't know, bodily fluids that's coming out on their face, and then the conjurer has to, or I guess, lick it off of their face.
Yep.
Which is incredibly disgusting. And then they take blood from, was it their toe?
Their toe, yeah.
Yeah, they take blood from their toe and inject it into the corpse's tongue. Again, that just sounds so gross to me that
it does. But if we take a step back from that particular description, what we've got here is it's the licking of the froth is a kind of intimacy and a recognition that the necromancer and his or her resurrected corpse need to be intimate. I don't necessarily mean in a sexual way, but you can't get much more up close and personal than licking off the corpse froth. And presumably by swallowing, the necromancer has taken part of the zombied corpse into him or herself. Whereas, it's almost like, actually, it's like a mother animal licking off goop off of their kitten's or puppy's face, right? It becomes a very intimate act. As for the toe and tongue connection, I sort of always have interpreted that as sort of topping and tailing, like it's almost a yin and yang. It's opposites,
sure,
opposite parts of the body. So from a symbolic perspective, yes, it is truly disgusting, but it also kind of has a cultural logic to it.
Okay, that is the sweetest way I've ever heard a corpse froth story told. So congratulations on that. It's also the only corpse froth story I've ever heard. So apparently I am missing out. So since we've covered how folklore and urban legends influences media, in what way does media then influence the legends being told? I assume there's a story in the book where they were afraid that once you put the legend on a movie, it'll stay forever like that and it'll never change. But are we seeing where the movies are now influencing the telling of the legends?
Yeah, well, absolutely. That the films, because of their accessibility and because of their permanence, and by conservative, I don't mean that in a political sense. I mean conservative in the sense that my watching Candyman in 92 and my watching Candyman in 2020, the film itself has not necessarily changed, right? That's what I mean by conservative.
Sure.
So it becomes a conservative text. It becomes an easily accessible text, but it does tend to standardize the telling and the details of a particular story. That's one of the problems. And I know, as my PhD is actually in folklore studies, and I've been part of the International Society of Contemporary Legend Research since the mid-90s. This is an academic group that studies urban legends. In being a folklorist and being interested in these kinds of stories, one of the things that has really struck me is how difficult it is to collect these stories, because Jan Brunvan's books are so well known, the movies are so well known, that you start telling us, hey, have anybody heard stories, the way we're supposed to collect folklore, stories similar to this, going, oh, come on, don't be stupid. It's in that movie. Oh, yeah, I've heard that. It's in that film. I had an experience, this was quite a few years ago, with the movie The Ring. Ringu, the original Japanese version. Because that uses an urban legend as its initial, what would you call it? That's what gets the narrative rolling, is the urban legend about the haunted videotape. I arranged at the university I was teaching at. It wasn't Worcester, it was another university. They had an Asia Pacific student society at this university, made up of East Asian students, obviously. Anyway, I arranged at one of the cinemas a screening of Ringu specifically for them. But before the film, as I was sort of introducing it and thanking everybody for coming, I wanted to sort of see, have any of you guys heard this story before? Have you, and everybody had heard the story before about the haunted videotape, where you watch these strange images and then you get the phone call, and 7 days later you die from fear. Everybody was familiar with that particular story. Great, can you give me details? And they all stared at me blankly going, well, it's in the movie we're about to watch. So the movie was what gave us that particular story. This is not something which ever entered oral circulation. It never entered folklore, as it were. This is the story that's at the basis of Ringu. Although it is worth mentioning, and I need to explore this in more detail, I think, one of the things that really surprised me with the Slender Man movie, other than just this really is one of the worst films I've ever seen, is it really felt like somebody had taken a reboot of The Ring and changed Sadako or Samara in the American version and replaced it with Slendy. Like this was not a Slender Man narrative. This was much more a Sadako Samara narrative or a variation on it than it had anything to do with Slender Man.
Huh. Oh, I can't believe you thought that deep about that movie.
I don't get out much. What can I say?
So I'm sure it was a great film. So it was not. It was not. No. So with the modern culture, computers, that sort of thing, how do we see folklore changing? You mentioned Slender Man. Momo is another one that people. Yeah. There are people. When I was researching to speak with you, I was looking for books on this type of thing, and there are books who say, no, you don't understand. Slender Man is real. That like Pooka in the Pooka Lives story that Laurel Toupal is in, that the belief in the character has given the entity actual life, and that there now is a Slender Man out there. And to me, that's strange because we can actually track to where Slender Man was created. So can you, is that something that you find happening beyond just Slender Man?
Well, Slender Man's a really good example, and that's where I have a little bit of knowledge about this. And in this, unfortunately, I am at odds with not just colleagues in this field, but very close personal friends of mine, who I just think have got Slender Man wrong. And I question, this is controversial, I question the truthfulness of anyone who says they believe in Slender Man. And I think it is motivated by a wanting to believe than actual belief itself. I want to be frightened by Slender Man, therefore I will work myself up into this terror frenzy. But that has to happen because there's nothing to believe. My problem with Slender Man isn't so much with Slender Man himself or with the narratives, because it was always created as a fictional entity. Nobody ever believed it. I did a little bit of research on this, and there's a very good book that this research appears in. Not just my chapter, other people's chapters are also quite excellent, or are excellent. Mine,
but especially yours. Especially yours.
No. I really was not. That was not what I was.
No, I know. I got you.
As I did a little bit of an informal survey amongst two particular groups. My son was mid-teens at that time. I think he was 14 or 15 years old. And my undergraduate students, so sort of between 18 and 21 years of age. So with these two groups, my students didn't respond to the survey, but my son was nice enough to really put pressure on all of his friends to fill it out. So I've got this really great little sample of 14, 15-year-olds from a few years ago. And one of the best responses that I got, this was, of course, all anonymized. And when I was going through the results, my son knew exactly who said this particular comment. And as soon as he said that, I could hear this kid's voice very much in the comment. In my question, do you believe in Slender Man? The response was, no, I'm not 6.
Right.
You know?
Or schizophrenic, like the one girl that stabbed her friend.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what gets conveniently left out about the Washoe County attempted murder case of those girls is that it wasn't just Slender Man who told her to do this. She was also doing it to appease Voldemort. And I think there was another pop culture baddie that she was trying to appease. So everybody focuses on the Slender Man, but nobody's talking about banning Harry Potter.
Right. And I think that her history was that she had always heard a voice, and that what that voice was changed through probably whatever she was exposed to. And then as far as Momo, people are just convinced themselves of of ridiculousness.
I think the question needs to be asked. There needs to be a secondary, more precise question there, not for you, but for those people investigating Momo or Slender Man, and that is, who believes, and what specifically do they believe? So what I felt with Slender Man, and I'll mention Momo in just a moment, but with Slender Man, I think what perpetuates the Slender Man stories is not fear of Slender Man, but fear of what other people might think about Slender Man. So it's not that I'm scared of what the idiots next door are thinking about this.
Right.
So let me give you an example of Momo. My daughter, who's 12 now, so when Momo was circulating, she was 10 or 11, I think. And from her primary school, we got a letter and emails from the school warning us as parents not to talk about Momo. Not to talk about this stuff in front of kids, because the kids were getting really freaked out by these stories. And when I asked my daughter about this, she sort of gave me that, well, duh look, that only a 10-year-old can give you, and said, nobody believes this. We all just like freaking each other out. It's their parents who get worried. The kids are having fun with it. It's the parents go, we can't be talking about Momo. Of course you need to talk about Momo, because even my 10-year-old at the time, recognized it as nonsense.
One more thing before I let you go. I mentioned that how disgusting and wonderful in a horror movie the corpse froth would be. And you mentioned earlier that we really don't pluck enough out of the old urban legends and stuff for our movies because it's free. You don't have to pay for rights for this stuff. They're literally just great ideas from the past that you can use in your films. Is there a certain folklore monster or a legend tale that you would want in a movie, and why? I guess pitch me the film or the scene.
Oh gosh. No, I'm sure most of the monsters I love have been very well trodden. So things like Jack the Ripper, Chupacabra, aliens. I guess maybe, I can't get enough alien abduction narratives, as I'm absolutely fascinated with that stuff. Also stories about the devil. I like the theologically oriented stories. And all of these areas are very well covered cinematically. So I don't know how to answer that particular question. Yeah.
Well, one thing I don't think is very well covered, and I mean, you're probably much more knowledgeable about this than I am, but here we get a lot of American folklores, Christian religions, or Catholic. It's the exact same exorcism rites and stuff like that. We very rarely get anything from other cultures that aren't catering to a predominantly white Christian market.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it would be really cool to kind of explore some other faith traditions and say, hey, maybe there's other beliefs. I think there was one I saw recently or a few years ago had a Dybbuk box or something like that, which is a little bit different, but I want more variety. I think the Curse of La Llorona was from a different culture than what I'm used to. Yeah.
Sure.
And so even though, I mean, the movie had some good parts and bad parts, I was at least appreciative of, all right, they're bringing in new stuff that other cultures have experienced that I haven't.
Two points on that. One is there's an absolutely amazing Hindi horror film called Tumbad, Tumbad, which really works within the context of Hindu mythology and Hindu demons. It's an absolutely wonderful film that I would recommend people see. The other point is that this research is a tad in the early stages, I guess, to go into too much detail. But one of the things that I am currently researching is Jewish horror films and Jewish horror narratives. Not just Dybbuks, but golems. And there's a terrific Polish film from a couple of years ago called Demon, which is a fascinating variation on the Dybbuk story. Way better than The Possession, which is, I think, the one you were mentioning, the Dybbuk.
Oh, yeah. That was... Look, I'm trying to forget that whole era of horror where every January we got a really crappy film. I'm trying to block that whole era out of my mind. But yes, The Possession, I think it was.
Yeah.
So
yeah, Jewish horror films is a particular interest of mine.
So, well, to twist it maybe a little bit, who would win in a fight?
Between
Chupacabra, Bigfoot, the Jersey Devil, probably the Jersey Devil, right?
No, I'd say Chupacabra. He's a fast little man, fast little creature.
Huh.
Bigfoot would, Sasquatch would turn around wanting to give sort of a slammer punch downward, and already the Chupacabra would nod through his Achilles tendon.
See, and that's why we turn to a guy with knowledge, because he understands he understands the fighting style of mythical monsters, and
see, the thing about the Jersey Devil, and this is just typical of people I know from Jersey, is he'd be sitting in a little outdoor sun chair with a can of beer, saying, "No, I'll just watch. You guys, I'll watch."
Well, my favorite mythological creature is Mikel Koven. And I really, really, really appreciate you joining me. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And that is the show. Once again, I'd like to thank my guests, Laurel Toupal and Dr. Mikel Koven. And thank you for listening. Feel free to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. And remember, like any great franchise, your story isn't over yet.